Thank you all for joining us for live Q&A with Rabiu Alhassan from FactSpace West Africa and Raymond Lee from FakeNetAI. This session is a complement to the bite-sized lunchtime talk you've already watched. Welcome back, Rabiu and Raymond. Once again, Rabiu is the founder of FactSpace West Africa, a nonprofit social enterprise working to counter disinformation and propaganda across West Africa. And Raymond Lee is the CEO and founder of FakeNetAI, a cybersecurity firm serving enterprises and individuals that leverages artificial intelligence to detect synthetic media or deep fakes. Welcome back. Good to see you both. Let's get started. We have a few people lined up to ask you some questions today. So the folks are Yandu, Maxine, Kimberly, Richmond, Ebony, Jeremy, and Benjamin. There are lots of interest in your talk. I don't see any hands just yet. That's because my screen is not set up to see other people, but I'm expecting to see some hands going up very shortly so that we can start getting some questions going. So who would like to jump in for our first question? Thank you, Yandu. Go ahead, turn your camera on. Maxine, you're next after that.
Hi, thank you for joining us today. I thought your that video prepared for us was very interesting. I'd never heard of deepfake technology to this extent, so it was fascinating. So one thing I noticed from the video with describing how we can identify deepfakes is that it involves like zooming in, or I guess having more of a sharper eye for detail. And I imagine that the general public may not always have such a sharp eye for these details to figure out what is fake versus what is real. So I guess my question is, do you foresee some sort of verification process being, or a verification symbol, I guess, even appearing on media, similar to how like on Instagram, there's like a blue check mark if it's actually the celebrity's account, or I know in Canada with like non-GMO foods, there's like a label that it's non-GMO, there's a label that something is organic. So anyway, so my question is, do you foresee some sort of verification symbol or some way for the public to easily, I guess, identify what has been verified versus what is a deep fake?
I'll start, and then Rabiu, you can jump in. But I do see that happening. You probably already see on social media that there's a bunch of posts that get flagged with a fact check indicator indicating whether or not that content has been sort of verified. And we see the same thing happening with we do see the same thing probably happening with deepfakes as well. That type of labeling is already being done with cheap fake videos. So there have been a few cheap fake videos in the past in which, say, a political figure's speeches are sort of spliced together to create something that they never said, and or the speech is slowed down significantly to make them seem like they're slurring and drunk on the job. And those types of posts, videos have been labeled on certain social media platforms. Should a deepfake detection company like us work out a deal with social media platforms, video hosting platforms, then I imagine that's the path we would take. I do think with this type of approach, if we're using machine learning to flag a piece of video, we need to educate the audience on what the machine learning algorithm is actually doing, and also train the audience on how to spot deepfakes themselves. We think it's still possible to spot deepfakes, the majority of deepfakes now, based on the artifacts that we touched on in the presentation. Eventually, it may be harder to spot these artifacts, so we have to make sure that whatever model or whatever methods that we're using, whatever automated methods we're using, we're making it explainable. And so we're working on tools to make our model more explainable as well, so that the audience can actually believe the output of our machine learning model.
Our next question is from Maxine. Oh, Rabiu, did you have something to add?
I just wanted to say that the question in itself was interesting and could possibly inspire what would happen next with regards technology companies that have invested in detecting deepfake technology. So it's an idea in itself, but I'll be hesitant to say that we would get to a point where to be able to pinpoint what is true and what is false with regards to synthetic media. It would mean that whatever video that's available out there that is authentic would have to be splashed with a logo that says true. I would hesitate to get there. We should always bear in mind that there is always the shiny new thing that would pop up that would generate a lot of interest, but would wane off over time. It doesn't look like it's similar with deepfake technology because of how social media companies are adopting it, leveraging on shallow fakes, and because of also the interest in young people to use it to have fun. But we know also that there are there are people out there with malicious intent who are willing to leverage on this technology to do nefarious things. And already we've seen the alert that has come from the FBI in this direction. So hopefully we don't get there to respond directly to your question. But I should mention that already we are seeing lots of efforts to help in flagging deepfake technology, and not just deepfake technology, but in general, synthetic media that has to do with pictures and also videos. We have the claim review schema, which is a tool that allows fact checkers to be able to annotate their articles, fact checks. So it could easily be identified by the technology companies, so they could either take down or reduce the reach of things that have been flagged by fact checkers as false. There is a new tool that has been built that's basically concentrating on synthetic media, including pictures and videos. So I'm sure it's an evolving space. Anything anything new can be developed in a very short possible time with regards to what's happening and how things are evolving. So I would still hesitate to say that we would get to a point where you would need to see a logo on a video to authenticate that the video is real or not.
Thank you for that question, Yandu. Maxine is up next, and after that, Kimberly.
Hi, thank you both so much for being here. My name is Maxine Van Doorn. I'm a speech language pathologist and a PhD student in linguistics. My question has to do with resolving tensions between teaching people about deepfakes and the dangers of deepfakes and the risk of them losing trust in media, which we've seen kind of with fake news, right? We know that fake news happens, and there's also been this big, deep trust in journalists and media that comes from any source except, you know, certain people or certain sources. So how do you resolve that tension?
This question would also start with, I would have to ask a question. So what happens if we don't exist and we are not operating to be able to help people understand and see through the nuance of issues that are being discussed? So for I would explain this from a perspective coming from West Africa, Ghana. So specifically on social media, where we have WhatsApp being the leading messaging platform in the country. And we have lots of people who are not literate or misinformation literate, consuming videos, images coming through about COVID-19, and they thinking whatever they see on WhatsApp is true. Whatever they see on social media is true. And this does not only thrive online, but it ends up spreading by word of mouth. And that is even much more dangerous because you're not able to trace and track it and duly deal with it. So you can imagine if we were not around trying to flag these videos and these pictures and synthetic media, and the space was just there and people were taking advantage of the lack of active flagging of misinformation, you could just imagine the repercussions that would come with. But it's also crucial to understand, and I'm sure lots of research papers have been done to explain how relevant our operations are and also identify some gaps with regards to our operations. But to put things into perspective, I would have to mention that for fact checkers worth their salt, you operate leveraging on the code of ethics set out by the International Fact-Checking Network. And when you look at the code of ethics, which is a global media metric standard, which the social media companies rely on to engage fact checkers to operate on their platform as third-party fact checkers, you would see in the things that are supposed to put people at ease. The code of ethics, some of the ethics demands that you make your methodology with regards how you flag misinformation palpably clear on your platform. So anybody who jumps onto your platform to consume news can follow through the methodology you use in flagging misinformation and arrive at the same conclusion. You are supposed to be very transparent with your sources because of how money is able to influence stuff. So people would know that the funds that you get is not overly influencing your editorial policy. You are supposed to be non-partisan and independent in your operations, and you are supposed to explain this out when you are applying to be signatory to the IFCN Code of Principles. So these are all guarantees and these are all safeguards of the process to ensure you are doing the right thing. But regardless of how much you put in place safeguards, there are always people who would question whatever you are doing. And we are seeing that play out clearly in the United States, where regardless of how much effort people are putting in to be non-partisan and independent in their operations in terms of churning out the news, we are having a segment of the US citizenry question and lump everything up as fake news. That was quite mainstreamed by your former president, Donald Trump, and we've seen that trickle into discussions, not just in the US, but around the world, and particularly in Africa. In parts of Africa, people still trust that Donald Trump is truthful, which he's far from.
Kimberly is up next.
Hi, I was like 3 minutes late, so I don't know if this question has been asked already. But I am a fourth year or rising fourth year linguistics student at NYU doing my PhD, and I have a background in forensic linguistics. So the evidentiary trail of the deepfake is really interesting to me. And I wonder, because there was a part of the video that talked about fraud and like somebody using a deepfake and bringing it to court with them and everything like that. And there was mention of the idea that the metadata was used to be able to suss that out. I have a couple of questions about that. Is there always metadata that's going to be sussed out? As this becomes more advanced, is it going to be that you have certain situations that you can sort of hide that away and this person gets locked up for however long, perhaps? Or is there going to be, or do you foresee perhaps some kind of legislation or like some kind of preemptive thing with regard to the use of deepfakes and evidentiary things? Because the thing that comes up to me is the idea that while we do have fact checkers, not everyone is honest, right? And sometimes those people who are not honest are people who have lots of money or lots of influence, people who perhaps might be affiliated with a government that sanctions something like a move bombing or a COINTELPRO or something. So how does one on the back end detect these things if it's been, saved and the hard drive has been burned, and then all I have is this image of this person I don't like robbing a bank so I can have their apartment. What happens then?
With regards to the metadata trail question, so there are solutions that kind of, well, I guess metadata actually can be sort of adjusted, edited. So that's a big vulnerability there. And as far as solutions towards addressing that, some companies are developing a blockchain-based solution. And how it works basically is this blockchain-based solution is sort of integrated into the actual hardware that is capturing a video or image. And at the point of capture, metadata details such as time, location, and other types of metadata are all captured at the time of the video or image capture, and that information is put on immutable blockchain, and anytime that image or video is sent to somebody else or modified, that transaction is logged on this immutable blockchain. So basically what you can do is you can trace the image always back to the original source. And so that is a potential solution. I think a big challenge with that is adoption, making sure that all the hardware manufacturers actually adopt that type of technology. And then in regards to you mentioned that if somebody were to create a deep fake, I didn't quite understand the last scenario you pointed out, in which like.
Well, the idea of being vulnerable to being framed or put up for something that you did not do. And sometimes when that happens, it's not just some person across the street who doesn't like you, perhaps. Maybe this is also something that happens because perhaps the government of whatever place you're in does not like you. Like, and of course, you know, if things are stacked up against you in that way, there's not going to be very much you can do besides leave anyhow. But I wonder what happens in certain situations where, you know, all people have is this video, because it's like, being a forensic linguist, one of the things that I see a lot is how easy it is for people to get swept up into the judicial system and then only be found to be innocent 10, 15, 20, 25 years later. And as these deep fakes get closer and closer to a point where even myself, for a few seconds, I find myself being fooled. And there are lots of situations where all you have to do is convince 12 people on the street that this person did whatever it is that they did, whether or not it's actually true. So I wonder, as this becomes more and more sophisticated, even if, let's say, you do find yourself in a judicial system that is saying you did this thing, or if you have like one of the more, you know, legendary cases of a COINTELPRO, like where they were investigating Black Panthers and saying all kinds of things about everyone in order to, you know, achieve whatever goal, or, you know, situations like that. Like, I wonder how well something like that blockchain that you mentioned or something like that would work in situations like that. Is there something that you, a layperson, or whatever expert witness your attorney hires, would be able to find that on the back end? Or is there a way that that could all be destroyed? And you would essentially be stuck for 20 years until the technology gets good enough to be able to get you out, which I've also seen, and it's terrible.
Yeah, then that's a very scary future. And I think if deepfake detection or deepfake technology gets to the point where it's impossible to detect, then that's a very real outcome. So that's why it's important for us to try to stay ahead of this while we still can, and develop deepfake detection technology to detect the latest deepfakes. Or the blockchain technology that I mentioned earlier. But yeah, I think this question highlights sort of the danger that deepfakes pose. As deepfakes get better and better and better, our trust in media slowly erodes. Seeing video used to be sort of like the gold standard of truth. If you saw it on video, then you know it happened. But slowly and slowly, that's kind of, that trust is eroding. And the better we can sort of detect deepfakes and prove that our solution is the best, then we could stop that erosion. So yeah, I think your example really highlights a very, very dangerous but possible case of deepfakes causing harm in the future.
And I'll also thank you, Kimberly, for sharing that. And I know in the U.S. context, we recently had a case where a competing cheerleaders, one of the mothers created a deepfake for the daughter, somebody who was competing against her daughter in cheerleading. So if we reach the point where that's the level at which these are being created, I think there's some definite consideration for the things that that Kimberly discussed. All right, so Benjamin is up next.
Hi. So I just have a quick question, I guess, about who will be using this particular type of technology in West Africa. Personally, I'm Cameroonian, and so I'm very interested in this next question. In terms of who will use it, do you think that, for example, it will be people in government giving all these different types of corruption that's going on? Do you think it will be like guerrilla groups or people who are trying to cause destabilization or terrorist groups? Or do you think it's possible that former colonial powers will intervene by putting forth these deepfakes to push their agenda? And do you think they would be good at hiding some of the trail relative to being able to detect them?
This is one hell of a question. This is a loaded one. So in terms of who would use it, for now, we are collaborating with FakeNetAI to offer the solution to the public. So anytime there is a weaponization of deepfake or synthetic media that has the potential to undermine the country's stability, any country in the West African sub-region stability, we collaborate to verify and put out the right information. And we've started that by launching a section for deepfake literacy, sort of, and for detecting also things like this on the Ghana Facts platform. So FactSpace West Africa, which is committed to taking fact-checking across the West African sub-region, has launched a fact-checking project specifically in Ghana, which is the first project to be launched. We started operating in 2019, and from 2019 till now, we've been tackling misinformation related to elections, politics, governance, the health sectors, particularly COVID-19, and some other sectors. So we have successfully launched this section, and we are waiting on the public to alert us to synthetic media that they are concerned about. And if it meets our criteria for selecting claims, we'll duly flag that and put out a fact check report. And this is in close contact with Raymond and the team at FakeNetAI. What we are hoping to do in terms of reaching out to the other West African countries and even possibly other countries across Africa is to collaborate with other very young fact-checking organizations in other countries. But you should understand this in context that for us as a fact-checking organization signatory to the IFCN Code of Principles, we are only one of less than 10 on the African continent. So there will be enormous work to do if we are supposed to reach the entire continent. But the good thing is we are having lots of very young fact-checking organizations set up. But as to whether they could end up being signatory to the IFCN Code of Principles is another thing altogether. But we are ready to offer them trainings. we are ready to guide them, like we've done with a partner in Zimbabwe, to be able to be IFCN verified so they can be able to engage with fact-checking organizations. So that is with the efforts to tackle weaponization of synthetic media. But beyond that, Raymond, I'm sure, will throw some more light on how the team at FakeNetAI would want to collaborate with governments across the continent to be able to tackle weaponization of synthetic media, because it's crucial that governments have the right technology to respond at the right time anytime there is weaponization of something like this, because it can easily be used to create chaos. And we've seen that happen in Gabon. Even though it wasn't synthetic media, there were reports that a video of the president, who had been away for some time, was synthetic media, and it triggered a near coup, even though it was unsuccessful, and people lost their lives. So it's real. It can cause damage. It can be weaponized to destabilize countries. So from the side of tackling weaponization of it, we come in as a fact-checking organization, but governments would have to take the initiative to engage and have access to the technology. I'm sure Raymond would have safeguards to ensure that governments don't overly abuse it, but he would throw some more light on that when he speaks. Raymond.
Yep. And so we are talking with governments of a number of countries and pitching our product to them to try to develop this product further for them so that they could use it for their particular use cases. And to make sure that they don't sort of abuse the technology, we're sort of very making sure that we're limiting the access of our technology to countries that we do trust, and making sure that there's, in general, limited access to our tool. There are ways to sort of try to suss out the parameters of a machine learning model, and that is a very real problem. So if somebody, knew the parameters of our machine learning model, they could actually try to then attack it and fool our model. And that's one thing that we are guarding against by limiting access to our tool, by limiting the people that have access to it, and also limiting the number of times that they could use it. You can actually suss out parameters by running multiple examples through a machine learning model, and then getting sort of feedback on the parameters that way. So if somebody wants to use our model like 100,000 times in a very short period of time, we won't allow that. We'll set rate limits on our API. That type of attack is known as an adversarial attack, a machine learning adversarial attack. And there are real examples of these types of adversarial attacks happening in the real world. A very scary case of adversarial attacks happening in the real world is it's related to self-driving cars. So there are self-driving cars that have cameras that are trained on machine learning technology that really learn how to detect what objects it sees. So if there's a self-driving car that's navigating on the street, there's a camera that's looking for the lines on the street to make sure that it's going in the right lane. Sorry for the background noise. There's also, the camera is also working to detect, say, things such as traffic lights and stop signs. And so with machine learning models, there's many parameters in the machine learning model, so they're very sensitive to little perturbations or noise. And so what that means is, and so this is sort of how, this is sort of a vulnerability of machine learning models too, is they're very sensitive. So, this type of self-driving camera can look at a stop sign and detect it over 95% of the time, probably over 99% of the time, detect the stop sign correctly. But if you add some imperceptible noise, so change some of the pixels in that stop sign image, or in the case of what some researchers did, they put some tape on the stop sign in some very strategic places, and they were able to fool the camera on the self-driving car to thinking that it was not a stop sign. That same type of attack can happen in deepfakes. You can imagine someone could mess around with a few of the pixels in a video, in the frames of a video, and if they knew that our model was accurate, they could, and they knew the parameters of our model, they could then change some of the pixels in that video and then try to fool our model, which a government may rely on to make decisions such as, decisions on relations with another with another country, or decisions in the courtroom, stuff like that. So that's a very real threat, and there's a lot of research in that field of adversarial attacks that we're leveraging as well.
So as moderator, I'm going to jump in really quickly. Benjamin, can you jump back in the queue? Sorry about that. We have 3 more people, so I want to make sure we get them in. So moderator's choice, I'm going to jump in with a question. Very excited to see the innovative work that's happening in West Africa. The focus of our event here at SICSS-Howard Mathematica is commenting anti-Black racism and also inequity. So I want to talk about the larger Black diaspora. So not just West Africa, but thinking more broadly. What other places are doing this work? Are there? I'm thinking about the United States. I'm wondering if the National Society of the National Association of Black Journalists is a partner, or Color of Change, or if they should be. How are we thinking about this specifically for the Black diaspora?
An interesting one. So the space is very diverse, very new or relatively new when it comes to the African continent. But we have a huge fact-checking organization on the continent from South Africa called Africa Check. It's not just a huge fact-checking organization on the continent. It's the first fact-checking organization in Africa and one of the leading in the world. They have offices across, I think, 4 countries. So South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, and Senegal. Apart from that, we have other fact-checking organizations, including PesaCheck, which is incubated by Code for Africa. They operate, I think, in 12 African countries. We have Dubawa, which is a Nigerian fact-checking organization by Premium Times of Nigeria, I think. And they operate in Ghana as well as Sierra Leone. So for FactSpace West Africa, we operate currently in Ghana, and we are hoping to launch a new project in the Gambia ahead of their elections in December this year. Fact-checking is a relatively new space, but specifically with regards efforts to tackle deepfakes, I think largely our collaboration with FakeNetAI would be, maybe not to blow my own horn, but would be kind of a new path that we are trying to create for ourselves. The collaboration, actually, as young as it is, it's less than 6 months old, but we managed to get shortlisted for the US Africa Tech Challenge, which was organized by the State Department. Even though we didn't emerge as the winners, it was a great learning exposure for us, and we got to pitch our idea to a diverse group of people. So if there is an opportunity to collaborate with some of the unions and associations that you've mentioned, why not? We can give it a go and see how we can test the idea and spread it not just in Africa, where we have very young democracies that can easily be affected by the weaponization of synthetic media, but how synthetic media could also be used to create quite a negative impact in communities outside, Black communities outside Africa. I don't know, Raymond, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I think I would be very interested in collaborating with the organizations that Nanette mentioned and any other organization that anyone here could recommend. I think expanding access to our tool is very important. And so I'll be sure to reach out to Nanette after this and follow up.
Up next is Jeremy.
Wonderful. Good morning. Thank you all so much for being here. One question I have for you all is I'm thinking about deepfakes and thinking about public school settings. I guess the best example I can think of right now, there's been like a lot of videos I've seen that have come out in regards to critical race theory. And just really interested to know like how your tool can be integrated within school settings, especially around politicized topics, such as critical race theory within the United States, but I'm sure that in other places such as Canada, throughout Europe, throughout Africa, that there's other youth are some of the most vulnerable, population and marginalized folks. And so I think I'm wondering how your tool can at least bring some type of more facts to youth so they can start making informed decisions. And just wondering if there is a way, or how do you all see this tool working within school settings?
Haven't explored the school setting as much. So I think you bring up some great points though. This deepfakes could be a powerful tool used for bullying. And if we help sort of the youth in giving them educational materials, helping them understand how deepfakes are created, how to detect deepfakes, providing them access to our tool as well, so that they could really understand what's real, what's fake. I think that could go a long way towards preventing people from trying to use deepfakes for bullying. And I think that's a great question, and that's a segment that we'll have to target in the near future.
We're going to bring things back around to Maxine.
Thank you. So my question is, how would you verbalize your goals as organizations, and how do you know you're meeting them? What are your outcome measures?
Okay. So for us at FactSpace West Africa, our goal is to help tackle misinformation and disinformation across the West African sub-region and ensure safeguards for very young democracies in the sub-region. For now, we've successfully launched the Ghana Facts project, and since 2019, managed to help Ghana safeguard our democracy during the elections, which was just some few months back in December 2020. We worked round the clock to help tackle misinformation, verify promises made by politicians, collaborated with Facebook, collaborated with the largest election observer group in the country, European election observers, some American companies, including Midan, to help safeguard the process. We were present the whole time on social media, helping tackle the weaponization of misinformation and disinformation. Also, because of how dynamic the space here in Ghana is, and because of where people consume their news, we had done some research. So we leveraged on our partnership with more than 30 traditional media newsrooms, including radio and TV, to be able to cross-publish our fact checks and debunks, both online and offline. So we are seeing our vision. We are achieving our vision by actualizing some of these projects, which we are hoping to do same in the Gambia just before the end of year. So yeah, we've done Ghana, successfully executed. So the blueprint is something we will be reproducing in the Gambia. And hopefully by next year, would also be doing something same in another West African country, basically helping safeguard elections and the stability of the countries. I don't know if I've answered your question though.
Ray, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I think one thing that we're hoping to do is to increase education awareness of deepfakes. That way, people can be less susceptible to deepfake attacks. As far as growing our business, we do think that enterprises are going to need our software to prevent losing their assets, whether it's their intellectual property or their or lost revenue from deepfake attacks. I think those are very real things that could happen, and that's sort of the example of the executive from the UK losing $243,000 due to a deepfake audio call is an example of deepfakes actually causing harm to enterprises, and we can see that those attacks will pick up in the future. So these enterprises need to have some sort of software like ours to protect against those attacks. And because enterprises have sort of the most to lose in terms of financials, we think they're probably a big target for us. And so we're working to establish contracts with large enterprises. And by establishing contracts with these large enterprises, that will allow us to branch out to media organizations and other sort of entities, the general public, provide general public tools to defend themselves as well. But we think enterprises would have to sort of fuel our growth, unless we could find a very innovative business model in which we could serve mainly to the general public.
Thank you. Ebony, you want to jump in?
Yes, good afternoon from the East Coast. First of all, I'd like to thank both of our presenters for developing a very informative video. As a layperson with regard to synthetic technologies and deepfakes, I wanted to immediately understand what are some of the hallmarks of a deepfake. So I quickly found that background abnormalities, eyeglass defects, and then water splashes were some of the hallmarks of identifying a deepfake. I'd like to hear a little bit more about if there are any other recent ways to identify deepfakes, as I suspect technology is quickly and rapidly advancing, and it's becoming harder and harder to identify deepfake as a layperson. And then I also wanted to comment that I am quite appreciative that you all are establishing contracts and identifying ways to disseminate information regarding synthetic technologies to the greater good, because I think that it's a significant issue. And I think that as laypersons, we don't know how to identify this, and we may not be privy to how significant the issue is. So I do appreciate that. But to come back around to the hallmarks of identifying deepfakes, are there any recent updates or ways that we can identify those deepfakes?
And let me piggyback on that also, and just say, if you could touch on if there are any metric standards for any technology that seeks to counter synthetic media, I think that would be a compliment to that too. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So updates on how to spot deepfakes. So the water splotches, that was a telltale artifact from an earlier iteration of StyleGAN deepfake generation technology. But since then, an updated version of StyleGAN has been released that removes those water splotches. As far as other ways to detect deepfakes, if you've seen the latest, the Tom Cruise deepfake videos, which are pretty realistic, pretty accurate. I mean, basically with those Tom Cruise videos, those Tom Cruise videos actually took like 2 months of machine learning training to create, and an actual visual artist spending days removing the artifacts. But if you take a look at those videos, they're very realistic. Those are very realistic face swap deepfakes, in which an actor's face has been swapped out with Tom Cruise's. They're not audio deepfakes. The actor is actually doing a Tom Cruise impersonation that is very, very spot on. So even though these are super realistic, there are ways in which you can detect that it is a deepfake. One way that researchers have found is that you can slow down the video, watch it frame by frame, and in any frame in which the actor sort of obscures his face a little bit, so say if he's putting his hand over his face, putting on sunglasses, that's a great time to look for sort of artifacts, because when the face is sort of distorted, it's very hard for a deepfake generation algorithm to actually work around distortions on the face, and it's also hard for visual FX artists to kind of catch those as well, to make sure that they're removing any artifacts. So if you slow down the Tom Cruise video, you'll see that in some of the scenes where he's putting his sunglasses on, you'll see that the sunglass sort of thing that connects from the glasses to the ear is sort of like removed in some frames, and so that's one way you can tell that it is in fact a deep fake. And basically what's happening there is the face swap is sort of going over the sunglasses and making it appear as if the sunglass is losing sort of one of the holders. Yeah, that's sort of an update on how to spot deepfake artifacts. I wish I could tell you that there's like new artifacts introduced that make it easier, but I guess that's why we need to have this type of deepfake detection technology. And Nanette, you had a question on metrics. So of the methods that I mentioned in the presentation, so there's ways in which you can train a machine learning model to look for artifacts that are common in deepfakes. And then you could also generate or codify a facial expression signature for somebody, so that you could use that to distinguish between them and an actor or a deepfake. And then there's another method where you can use a phoneme-visine mismatch, in which basically the audible sound that they're making does not match the shape of their mouth. So of those methods, all those methods are able to detect deepfakes with greater than 90% accuracy. And I think there's a lot of room for adding to these metrics. I think we can add metrics on how well does it detect females versus males, and then on different types of skin tone as well. So I think there's a lot of work that can be done there. And I think it's very important. That way we can make sure that this detection tool is working fairly. We know that facial recognition tools, one of the biometric tools that are being used today are very unfair. We know that facial recognition tools have up to greater than 90% accuracy, depending on what type of demographic you're looking at. So studies have shown that, okay, well, if you break down these metrics further, you'll find that, okay, well, facial recognition tools work greater than 90% accuracy on males who have light skin tone, and that 90% accuracy drops to around 70% accuracy on females with darker skin tone. And so you can imagine the types of issues that you could run into when you rely on facial recognition technology that is actually not fair across different types of skin tone and gender. And so we know that deepfake detection also has that same type of, we have that same responsibility with deepfake detection, creating deepfake detection tools so that we're not sort of marginalizing a type, females, males, different types of skin tones. And we want to make sure that it's providing accurate results across the board.
So we have two more questions from the field. We have Benjamin and Yandu. So if you could each unmute yourself and share your question together, so we can try and get them both in before we finish up in 8 minutes. Benjamin, go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you. Yandu, you want to go first? Nope, Benjamin's going to go first. Go ahead.
Oh, hi. So I just have one more question. So if you give the power of controlling this technology to governments, what if I'm an older member? What if I'm an older president and I really want to hold on to power and I have power over the deepfake technology and I just release deepfakes for both me and my opponents? And I say, well, I have the technology and the deepfakes about me are fake, but the deepfakes about my opponent are real. How would you mitigate a case like that?
A very good question.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Sorry, somewhat related to that. So currently, what are the consequences for getting caught producing a deep fake? And if there isn't much legislation, like for you, ideally, what would that look like? Like what sort of legislation would you like to see? So kind of related to Benjamin's question.
Rabiu, do you want to start?
I'll try. Benjamin, I understand you perfectly. We have a big issue with regards older presidents not wanting to relinquish power and staying in power for God knows how long, hoping to die whilst in power. But there are no two ways about this. There could be some efforts directed at countering deepfake synthetic media by allowing independent, non-partisan organizations like the one that I lead to work and do that. And the only trust you can have of our genuineness in executing our work is the fact that we are signatory to a global media metric standard. That is a safeguard. The trust we've built with the public by executing our role in a non-partisan way over the years would be what would have to show to encourage that you kind of trust what we do. So that is what we have to show with regards being not on the side of any of the parties. But with regards governments, I wholeheartedly believe that there are some governments who would want to take advantage of such a technology if they get the opportunity. That is true. And that is not even limited to the African continent. We know of powerful, we've just seen how democracy unraveled and nearly the US, which is seen as the leader of the free world, nearly lost it all. It just unraveled before our eyes. So it shouldn't be made to look like it is a continent-specific problem when maybe you talk about Africa. No, it is not. And we are seeing the rise of dictators, not just in Africa. We are seeing it happen all around the world. So there is a potential for that. But I'm sure if Raymond would speak, Raymond would want to hear you explain whether there are some standards and there are some organizations that kind of give a seal of approval for softwares that have been developed to counter deepfake technology. But beyond just giving the seal of approval, are there some guidelines that you would have to adhere to in terms of exposing whatever technology you've built and software you've developed to whatever party you would want to engage for even a commercial purpose? For us, we would see what we are doing as in the public interest, if we are doing it for the public good. But if you are going to be exposing the technology and trying to engage companies that are for profit and governments that would have their own ulterior motive with regards why they would be engaging you, I'm sure, like how we are signatory to the IFCN Code of Principles, maybe Raymond, there's something out there you can point to that offers some guarantee with regards whatever you are doing with the software. I don't know if I've tried enough to answer Benjamin's question. And for Yandu, I don't know with your question, have I done something? Have I tried answering that?
Is there laws to, I guess, or something, consequences for people if they get caught? And if there isn't, what would you want it to look like? Okay, so with deepfakes, I'm sure deepfakes fall under the broad umbrella of fake news. I'm not sure we on the African continent we have laws specifically dedicated to deepfakes, because technology is evolving, our laws are also evolving, but I'm not sure we've gotten there yet. But I should state that there have been research that has shown that a number of African countries have started adopting laws to help counter fake news. And these laws were largely informed by, I think, the Digital Service Law. I think there's a law of some sort that was passed by the European Union. And this has inspired the laws that have been passed on the African continent with regards to tackling fake news. But it's been shown from research that lots of the laws are being weaponized against activists and journalists. They are not being used to actually deal with fake news. So we wouldn't, for me, I'm a journalist that has practiced for more than a decade. I wouldn't encourage the passing of laws. If there are even supposed to be laws, I'll be expecting that governments, parliaments, the legislature would sit around a table with civil society organizations that have the know-how in this space, with journalists that have been operating in this space for years, to be able to come up with laws that would not be used to victimize journalists and to victimize those who dissent and activists. So I think that would be my position on that.
Also, in the U.S., there's legislation that has been developed in Texas and in California, making it illegal to develop a deepfake of a political candidate like right before an election. And so there's going to be more types of laws like that in the future, I believe.
Thank you both, Raymond and Rabiu, for an incredible discussion. The questions were free-flowing, and I suspect we would have gotten a lot more if we had more time to spare. I'm hoping you'll both drop your email addresses in the chat box so our participants can keep in touch. We are all looking for collaborators and partners in this work, and are appreciative of your time. Thank you all for watching. For more information on SICSS-Howard Mathematica, visit our website, follow us on social media, and join our email list.